I'll never forget the sound of those heart monitors beeping, the burning pain from the IV in my hand. And my father's cold voice said, "We simply can't afford this procedure." Not because we were broke, but because that money was already set aside for my younger brother's medical school. I was 19 and fighting for my life, and my parents just decided to let me die. But they had no idea that this decision would come back to destroy everything they built. This is how I survived and how justice finally found them. If you love stories where terrible people get exactly what's coming to them, hit that subscribe button right now. Smash the like button if you believe in justice, and stick around because this story proves that sometimes the best payback is simply telling the truth to the right people. Let's dive into this insane story of family betrayal and ice-cold revenge. It was a Friday afternoon when my world fell apart. I was lying in a hospital bed under harsh fluorescent lights. The room reeked of antiseptic and despair. My hospital gown was rough and kept sliding down my shoulders. Dr. Patterson walked in carrying a thick medical file. He looked worried but tried to stay professional. "Jessica," he said, pulling up a chair, "we have your lab results. I need to discuss treatment options with you and your family." My parents, Robert and Linda Hayes, stood like statues beside my bed. Dad clutched his briefcase like a shield. Mom stared out the window, her designer jacket perfectly pressed. Her mouth was set in a thin line like she was already annoyed. The doctor explained everything in simple terms. I needed surgery immediately. The success rate was high if we acted fast. Then he dropped the bomb that would split our family forever. The cost. "The surgical procedure will run approximately $92,000, Dr. Patterson explained. "Your insurance covers roughly half, but there's still a significant out-of-pocket expense." The silence was deafening. I watched my parents exchange a look. It wasn't the terrified glance of parents facing their child's death. It was the calculating stare of people doing cold math. Dad cleared his throat first. His voice was businesslike and final. "We'll need some time to discuss our options." But I already knew their decision. I had spent 19 years being the backup child. The one who came second to my younger brother Tyler's endless potential. Tyler was golden. He was 17 but already accepted into pre-med at Johns Hopkins. His future was mapped out with medical school brochures and scholarship letters. Tyler never had to beg for anything because our parents handed him the world on a silver platter. Their family discussion lasted exactly 15 minutes. I counted every second on the wall clock while their hushed voices carried from the corridor. They weren't arguing about saving me. They were negotiating my death sentence. When they returned, Dad's expression was set in concrete. Mom wore the same look she had when she told me we couldn't afford the art program I'd dreamed about. "Jessica," Dad said, sitting down like he was about to lay off an employee, "we've weighed all the factors, and we've reached a difficult conclusion." My mouth went dry. What conclusion? "Tyler's medical school track is already secured," Dad explained in his corporate tone. "His scholarship has strict requirements. We've invested our entire future into ensuring his success." "This surgery," Mom added, "would mean sacrificing Tyler's opportunities. We can't gamble his brilliant future on an uncertain medical outcome." An uncertain medical outcome. That's what my life had become to them, a risky investment with poor returns. "But I might die," I whispered, barely audible over the steady beeping. Dad's face remained stone cold. "We have faith that if it's meant to be, you'll find another way. Sometimes life requires us to be strong and figure things out ourselves." Then they left. No tears. No desperate phone calls to find alternatives. No last-minute change of heart. They simply collected their things, gave me a brief pat on the shoulder like I was an acquaintance, and walked out like they had just declined a timeshare presentation. I stared at that door for what felt like forever, waiting for them to burst back in. Waiting for Mom to run in sobbing and say they were wrong. But the only person who appeared was a social worker named Mr. Rodriguez. He carried a tablet and had the weary expression of someone who delivers heartbreaking news daily. "Jessica," he said softly, "I understand your parents have declined to pursue treatment?" I nodded, afraid my voice would crack. "Do you have any other relatives we could contact? Grandparents? Aunts or uncles?" I did have someone. Aunt Claire. My mom's sister who lived in a cozy apartment downtown surrounded by her pottery studio. We hadn't been close lately because Mom and Dad gradually pushed her away from our family. My aunt, I managed. Claire Morrison. 2 hours later, the door burst open like a hurricane. Aunt Claire stood there like an avenging angel. Her curly red hair was wild from rushing. Her paint-stained apron was still tied around her waist. She was 55 and barely 5 feet tall, but at that moment she looked like she could move mountains. "Jess, sweetheart," she breathed, racing to my bedside. She grabbed my hands in hers. They were warm and calloused from her pottery work and smelled like clay and lavender. I came the second I got the call. I broke down then. Not quiet sniffles, but deep, body-shaking sobs that came from years of feeling invisible. "Where are your parents?" she demanded, scanning the empty room. "They left," I sobbed. "They said they can't pay for surgery because of Tyler's medical school." Aunt Claire went completely still. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the force of pure rage. "They said what?" I told her everything. The consultation, the cold calculation, how they measured my life against Tyler's future and found me lacking. I watched my aunt's face transform from shock to heartbreak to something fierce and protective. "Well," she said, rolling up her sleeves, "that's absolutely unacceptable. Mr. Rodriguez." The social worker looked up from his paperwork. "What do we need to do to get Jessica's surgery scheduled immediately?" "Ma'am, the financial obligations dash. Will be handled," Aunt Claire said with absolute certainty. "I have my business, my savings, and if necessary, I'll mortgage my studio. This girl is not going to suffer because her parents have forgotten what family actually means." What followed was a blur of forms, consultations, and medical appointments. Aunt Claire attended every single meeting. She asked tough questions and signed every document without hesitation. When surgery was scheduled for that Wednesday, she was there holding my hand as they wheeled me into the operating room. The recovery was brutal, but Aunt Claire never left my side. She slept on the cramped hospital couch. She advocated fiercely with doctors and nurses. She transformed that sterile room into a sanctuary. My parents never called, never visited, never sent even a text message. After 8 weeks, I was healthy enough to be discharged. The doctors were thrilled. The surgery was a complete success, though I'd need regular follow-ups. Aunt Claire drove me to her apartment, my new home that smelled like fresh bread and felt like unconditional love. As I healed, something else began growing inside me. A crystal-clear understanding of who my parents truly were. They weren't just neglectful or misguided. They were heartless people who would sacrifice one child's life to advance another's career. And they had constructed their entire public image on complete lies. Robert and Linda Hayes were respected pillars of our community. Dad owned a successful accounting firm. Mom served on the school board and 2 hospital committees. Everyone admired them as the ideal family, accomplished, dedicated, raising their children with strong principles. But I had evidence of everything. Screenshots of messages where Mom told Tyler to ignore Jessica's theatrics. Email threads where they discussed my medical crisis like a budget line item. Hospital documents showing they refused to authorize life-saving surgery. Most crucially, I had an official report from Mr. Rodriguez documenting their refusal to consent to emergency medical treatment for their adult child. 10 months later, opportunity knocked in the form of Dr. Patricia Whitmore. Dr. Whitmore directed the Whitmore Institute for Medical Ethics. This prestigious organization awarded grants and recognition to outstanding families who exemplify medical professionalism and moral leadership. My parents had been courting her attention for over a year. They desperately wanted to win the Family Excellence in Medicine Award, $60,000 that would cover Tyler's remaining medical school expenses and boost Dad's professional reputation significantly. They had been featured in the Institute's quarterly magazine. They were celebrated as a model of medical family values in action. Dad was even scheduled to keynote their annual symposium about making difficult sacrifices to support the next generation of healers. The irony was absolutely perfect. On a peaceful Thursday evening, while Aunt Claire threw pottery in her studio, I composed a detailed letter to Dr. Whitmore. I didn't write it with emotion or anger. I crafted it like a clinical case study. I explained who I was, what had occurred, and what kind of people the institute was about to celebrate. I included documentation, surgical records, social worker findings, screenshots of my parents' callous messages. I attached photos from the Institute magazine featuring my parents alongside quotes about always prioritizing family welfare. At the conclusion, I wrote, "I believe in transparency, particularly regarding character assessment. I thought you should understand exactly what principles the Hayes family truly represents before honoring them for medical ethics excellence." I signed it, Jessica Hayes. 3 weeks later, my phone buzzed. Jessica Hayes? The voice was authoritative but compassionate. "Yes. This is Dr. Patricia Whitmore from the Whitmore Institute. I received your correspondence. Would you be available to discuss the situation you described?" We met at a quiet bookstore cafe uptown. Dr. Whitmore listened to my complete account without interruption. The diagnosis, the abandonment, Aunt Claire's rescue, my parents' fabricated narrative. When I concluded, she sat thoughtfully for several minutes. "Jessica," she said eventually, "following your letter, we conducted a thorough investigation of your family. We interviewed hospital personnel, reviewed official records, and contacted individuals familiar with your circumstances. Everything you've shared has been verified." She paused meaningfully. "Your parents submitted their application claiming they embody family-centered medical values and consistently prioritize their children's well-being. They provided endorsement letters from professional colleagues who were completely unaware of what actually happened to you." "What comes next?" I asked. "Next," Dr. Whitmore said, "accountability arrives." The consequences weren't explosive or public. There was no dramatic confrontation or media exposure. Instead, something far more devastating occurred for people like my parents. Their carefully crafted reputation crumbled piece by piece. The Whitmore Institute released a brief announcement stating the Hayes family was no longer under consideration for the Family Excellence in Medicine Award due to newly discovered information regarding their ethical standards and character. Within days, whispers began circulating. In our tight-knit professional community, reputation was everything. Questions spread like wildfire. What had the Institute uncovered? What kind of revelation could disqualify such an apparently exemplary family? The hospital committees where Mom served began requesting uncomfortable clarification meetings. Dad's accounting clients started scheduling appointments to address some concerns. Tyler's medical school scholarship came under review after an anonymous tip about questionable family circumstances. My parents attempted damage control, but how do you defend against documented truth? They couldn't dispute the surgical records. They couldn't explain away abandoning their own child to die. The destruction was gradual but thorough. Dad's firm lost 4 major corporate clients. Mom was politely asked to resign from both hospital committees. Their social media presence, once filled with professional accolades and family celebrations, became increasingly sparse as engagement disappeared. 8 months after the Institute announcement, Tyler called me. His voice was shaky with tears. "Mom and Dad are planning to relocate and start fresh in another state," he said. "Dad's practice is essentially finished." I felt a complex mixture of emotions, satisfaction, melancholy, and perhaps slight sympathy. "I know you contacted the Institute," Tyler continued, "and I understand you had every justification. But I need you to know I never wanted any of this to happen." "I know," I said calmly. "This isn't about you, Tyler. This is about them finally facing consequences for their choices." 18 months later, my father appeared unexpectedly at Aunt Claire's door. He looked significantly older and defeated. Through the window, I observed him pleading with my aunt for just a few minutes to explain himself. "She has no interest in seeing you, Robert," Aunt Claire said firmly. "Please, Claire. Just a brief conversation. I need to clarify dash." "Clarify what? How did you abandon your own daughter when she was dying?" "We made an error. A catastrophic error. But we're still family dash." "No," Aunt Claire said decisively. "Families don't abandon each other. You made your decision, and now you must live with the results." I watched him remain in his car for 10 minutes before finally driving away. The most satisfying revenge wasn't what I did to my parents. It was what I accomplished for myself. I survived. I flourished. I transformed their rejection into resilience and their abandonment into independence. They tried to delete me from their perfect family story, but I wrote my own incredible chapter instead. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply living authentically and speaking the truth. If this story resonated with you, crush that like button and subscribe for more tales where justice prevails. Comment below. Have you witnessed karma deliver perfect justice? Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.